Lawmakers just roasted Facebook publicly and compared Instagram to childhood tobacco use. Welcome to CNBC After Hours. I'm Mackenzie Sigalos. Let's start you off with the markets. Experts warned that September could be a rough month for Wall Street, and those predictions came true. All three indices ended the month lower thanks to inflation and supply chain concerns. It was the S&P's worst month since March of 2020 when we all went into lockdown. Now, while stocks were down, cryptocurrencies were up. As of 4 p.m. Eastern, Bitcoin rallied more than 5%, Ether was up 6%, and even Dogecoin got in on the action with a 3.5% rally. Also, here are some other numbers you should know. First up, 26. Reality set in for one popular meme stock, Bed Bath & Beyond. The company reported a 26% drop in revenue compared to a year ago, and it blamed a sharp decline in shoppers along with persistent global supply chain issues. The stock fell 22% after the disappointing earnings report. Next, 60. The U.S. Postal Service will start slowing down mail as of tomorrow. The controversial plan to restructure the Postal Service began last year, and now the USPS will shift away from expensive air transportation and use ground services instead. Still, a spokesperson for the USPS said that about 60% of first-class mail won't be affected. Lastly, 12. Virgin Galactic is cleared for takeoff once more. The FAA has completed its investigation into Sir Richard Branson's July spaceflight, which deviated from the intended flight path without warning. After the deviation became public, the FAA suspended the company's flights until it could investigate the matter. With the return of Virgin Galactic's operations, the stock jumped 12%. All right, so it's not exactly unusual for Facebook to find itself in the middle of a controversy, but today they had to answer for one on Capitol Hill. Facebook's global head of safety, Antigone Davis, faced tough questioning from senators over a study which found that Instagram could be harmful to teenagers. Now, Facebook tried to downplay the research, but the company suspended plans to develop an Instagram for Kids service after the study became public. CNBC's Julia Borston tells us what Facebook had to say to lawmakers.
The Senate Subcommittee on Consumer Protection grilled Antigone Davis. She is the head of global safety for Facebook. It all started when the Wall Street Journal published an expose, and a central part of this expose was an article that was all about the research that Facebook had done about the negative impact that Instagram has on teens, and yet did not necessarily act on that research. Ahead of the hearing, Facebook released the data that was at the center of the Wall Street Journal expose. They had two different sets of data, but what was fascinating about this is nearly 100 slides of data. Facebook annotated it significantly. So in a number of occasions, Facebook was really trying to discredit its own research. One of the things that the senators were particularly concerned about is this idea that Facebook is developing Instagram for kids. In the wake of all of this controversy after the Wall Street Journal expose, Instagram announced that they were going to put a pause on the development of Instagram for kids. A number of senators compared social media and Facebook in particular to tobacco, saying it's addictive and is particularly bad for children, and because of that, there needs to be additional regulatory scrutiny on how Facebook and Instagram operate. One of the things that was so notable about this hearing is how bipartisan it was. Senators from both sides of the aisle coming together to criticize Facebook and how it's handling these very important issues around teens and children. Facebook is under a lot of regulatory scrutiny right now. It has the antitrust issues. There's also the question of whether there is censorship or bias in terms of how content is moderated on the platform. And then, as always, there are always issues around data privacy. The fact that Facebook is also under the scrutiny about how it manages its content around children doesn't help at all.
All right, before we go, here's one last thing to know. It looks like we will avoid a government shutdown, but the U.S. isn't totally out of the woods yet. Congress approved a spending bill that would fund the government through December 3rd, and once signed by President Biden, will also avoid a shutdown at midnight. But that's not the only fight happening on Capitol Hill right now. Lawmakers still need to decide whether to raise the borrowing limit for the U.S. or allow it to default on its debts. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says that if an agreement isn't reached by October 18th, the U.S. could face an economic calamity. You can keep up with the debt ceiling fight along with everything else we talked about today by going to CNBC.com or downloading the CNBC app. That's all for today's edition of After Hours, but we will be back every Tuesday and Thursday, so see you then.